Cameraman? Alright, hi everyone, my name is Catherine Carpenter, and today I'm going to be doing my informative speech on the topic of the lost neighborhoods within the Twin Cities. First, I'm going to start out by asking you guys, does anybody know what this image is?
Stillwater.
No.
St. Louis?
No.
St. Paul.
Yes, it's St. Paul. In 1874, the illustrator George H. Ellsberg illustrated this image, and it's supposed to embody the time of growth and industrialization within the Twin Cities. In 1858, Minnesota was admitted into the Union, and as the cities began to thrive and grow, people started moving in and building their neighborhoods and homes. There were two specific types of architecture at the time, the first of which being colonial, which is depicted here. Colonial architecture had characteristics of symmetry, and it was a very regal look. Oftentimes people will think of the White House when they think of colonial architecture. And the next is Victorian architecture, which is not symmetrical at all, and is a bit more of a whimsical look. Within Minneapolis and St. Paul, some historic homes still stand, but there are many today that have been either compromised or completely ruined because of construction. Today I'm going to discuss the history of the neighborhoods of Summit Avenue, Lowertown St. Paul, and Oak Lake Park. Both of the houses I just showed, this one as well as this one, are actually still standing today in a neighborhood called Summit Avenue. I came across Visit St. Paul's official Convention and Visitors Bureau last Wednesday when I found an article entitled Summit Avenue's History, the Story of St. Paul's Famous Street, and I learned that Summit Avenue has the longest preserved stretch of Victorian-era homes in the nation. And they were built and owned by some of the wealthiest lumber, railroad, and business tycoons in all the Twin Cities. The original 440 homes were built at the time, and today, 373 of them still stand. This kind of preservation is very rare within the United States, and that is thanks to St. Paul developing two historic districts, one of which is called the West Summit Avenue District, and the next is the Historic Hill District. The second is named after James J. Hill, who is a famous railroad tycoon, and this is his mansion, and he built it for his family at the time, and this is a perfect example of the luxurious and extravagant architecture at the time. While most of the homes on Summit Avenue were preserved, 67 of them were still torn down, and one of which is the Amherst Wilder Mansion that was torn down in 1959, and it was the last to be torn down before the districts were created. Journalist Larry Millett explained in his 2017 Star Tribune article about the history of Lowertown St. Paul that so many homes are concentrated along and around Summit Avenue in St. Paul that it is easy to assume it has always been the city's prime mansion district. It's actually not. The original mansion district of St. Paul was actually Lowertown, which many of us know like this, or this today, for its trendy apartments, bars, and breweries, but many people would be surprised to know that mansions like this and this stood in its place over 100 years ago. It was a competitive place to live for wealthy people because it had high ground with really good views of the Mississippi River, and it was very close to downtown. In 1872, one of the city's first horse lines was built, and later it was replaced by a cable car line, and in 1819, the introduction of the streetcar changed things around a bit. In the 1880s, Trout Brook Valley, the most crowded railroad corridor, took over, causing many of the upper-class families to want to move out to a less busy part of town. In 1900, most of the mansions were completely gone, and many of the families relocated actually to Summit Avenue. In 1917, a freight terminal was built by the Great Northern Railway, and it took out over 250 homes. Millett concluded his Star Tribune article by explaining that the transformation of the old Lowertown neighborhood remains perhaps the most stunning example of its kind, and it demonstrated just how completely the urban fabric can change over time. Another example of this shift of urban fabric is the neighborhood of Oak Lake Park in downtown Minneapolis. Kristen Delagarde explained in her Historypolis article in 2014 that when it was first developed in the 1870s, Oak Lake was home to the affluent, who built the city's first neighborhood association and its second park. In 1936, the neighborhood was demolished, and this, in fact, is the original plans of the demolition for Oak Lake Park. As you can see here, this is the plan for the demolition, and today, actually, in its place stands the downtown farmers market. In here you can see the winding streets and the park and many people talked about that as well as the Victorian homes that surrounded it and how beautiful it was. The reason for the demolition of Oak Lake Park is actually similar to that of Lowertown. The introduction of the streetcar caused many wealthy people to have the money to be able to commute to work and have more land and bigger homes, and they could get to downtown easily. And the city's growth was overtaking residential areas, and they needed more space for businesses. The original families of Oak Lake Park actually moved to neighborhoods like Laurie Hill and Loring Park. Delegard concludes her article by stating that after the demolition of Oak Lake Park, parking lots, highways, expressways, and industrial zones hide evidence of early eras. As years go by, things change. Today, it is common for people to move into neighborhoods like developments where there's a template and most of the homes are very similar, whereas over 100 years ago, homes were built to emphasize custom qualities. Over time, construction has removed neighborhoods and homes that reflect the past. It is important for us to understand what came before us, so maybe next time you're in downtown St. Paul or Minneapolis, look around and wonder maybe what things might have looked like over 100 years ago. Thank you very much.
Thank you.